Before we dive into today's episode, I have something truly special to share. Next September, I'll be leading an intimate women's retreat through the south of France and northern Italy, and you're invited. Picture this: mornings exploring the colorful markets of the French Riviera, afternoons sipping wine, and a hotel view with golden Mediterranean sunsets. Whether you love photography, food, or just want to reconnect with your playful creative self, this trip is designed for you. Spots are limited, so if all this sounds like your kind of adventure, please visit tourwithabsolutely.com and look for the tour France and Italy with Crystal. You can also send me a message or check out the show notes. Claudine Hemingway is a descendant of famed writer Ernest Hemingway. We bumped into each other at a party and decided to team up and dive deep into French history, but with a twist, by bringing a spotlight to those lesser-known creatives in France. This is History with a Hemingway. Welcome back, guys. I am here with Claudine, and today is a big day. Thank you to all our listeners who have been listening for so long. If you're new, if you're old, if you're from the beginning, we appreciate you. But this is our 250th episode. And to celebrate, we are going to talk about some of the women that we admire most in French history. And I'm going to let Claudine take it from here.
Yeah, I tried to figure out, I've literally been thinking about this for weeks. Like, it's the 250th, it has to be something really special. And so in the past, when we've had big anniversaries, I've done things about the Louvre. But this time I thought, you know what? I'm going to look at all of the amazing women we talked about, especially those first 2 years of the podcast. And since Saturday the 8th was International Women's Day, I decided to pick out 10 different women and broke them out into 5 different categories of that basically kind of taught me and hopefully everybody else listening to the podcast the most.
I think this is the best way to celebrate because I've learned so much. I mean, I think we could all pass the French citizenship test now. I mean, because we've learned all the French history.
I know, when I had to do for my visa, when I had to renew my visa, because I'm on doing the visa, that's the path to citizenship. So you have to go, and I don't think you had to do this when you were here, because I think it's been in the last couple of years, but you had to go do these things, and it was horrible. It was 4 full days, and 4 Mondays in a row. And one of the days, though, was about history. The other ones were about like what to do if you have a baby in France and finding an apartment. And it was like, first of all, don't need the one about the children. Second of all, it was like everybody in this room already has been living here for like a year. I think we have a place to live. But one of the days was about French history. And I was like, okay, this is going to be the day. It's going to be so good. So everybody kept looking at me to help them with the answers.
I love it. Not having a baby. I already have a home.
It was kind of funny. It was like what to do to get into the healthcare system and all the other, there was all these expats from literally all over the world there. And I think I was actually the only American. There was Australians and British people and everything. And by the 4th week, we all became friends. And it was like, we needed this when we like moved here, not now.
We have settled.
We have settled. But the only part I loved about it was the history. And they talked about how that was like part of the citizenship test. And I was like, sweet, that's the part I'll ace. But we are going to talk, and I broke it out into 5 different categories. And the first one we're going to talk about is, because she was our very first episode, but 2 women that were models for artists that then became artists of their own. And that is Victorine Moreau and Suzanne Valadon.
We love those ladies. Those were such great episodes.
Yeah, and I also have noted Victorine was episode 7 and Suzanne was number 1. And I'm going to put links of this for each of these on my website as well, so you could go back and listen to each one. But Victorine Moreau was the model for Manet, and she was born in 1844 and she lived until 1927, but she was discovered in 1862. She was modeling in the atelier of Thomas Couture, and that's when Manet met her and saw her, and he decided, I need to paint her. And she was the model for his Olympia and Déjeuner sur l'Herbe, 2 of his most famous paintings that are both held in the Orsay. She was born into a pretty established family, and she started to paint herself. And so just like Suzanne, which I'll tell you about, they both would sit there with these artists and just absorb what they were doing. So they would see the way that they would handle the brushes and how they would use the paint and the different techniques and the different kinds of paint. And they would just kind of absorb all these things while they're sitting there posing for them for, sometimes days and days on end. And then they'd go home and then they would just decide, I'm going to go and just start painting and creating my own things.
And I mean, I can imagine why that would happen after watching them for all those hours.
I mean, you're probably like, what else are you going to do? Really?
Your imagination is running wild.
Exactly. So she sat with Manet until 1873. That was the last painting she did with him, posing for him. And it was the one at the railroad station, which is held in DC and was recently in Paris at the Orsay. But she also posed for Degas as well. She didn't start to paint until 1875. She exhibited at the 1876 Salon along with Manet. But at the end of her life, she only had painted 3 pieces that we have to this day. After she died, her she was gay and she lived with this woman and she had died and then Victorine died later. And it's reported that the neighbors saw a pile of canvases and furniture and things in a giant pile and lit and burned.
What is wrong with people and
Yeah,
family?
it's really sad. So 2 of her paintings are held here in France in the Colombe, which is not very far from Paris, which I need to get out and go see. And then there is one that's reported to be in Boston in a museum. So those are the only ones we have of her left today, which is really sad. But what she was, she's in the just 2 most famous paintings that Manet did. She did 6 paintings in the end with him, but 2 are the most famous paintings in the world of Manet. And he had said to her, hey, someday if I end up making money off of this, I'll give you some more money, because as a model for the time, they actually got paid pretty good money, but it wasn't very much. And so Manet died and she went to Suzanne Manet, his widow, and said, hey, he told me this. And Suzanne was basically like, bugger off, lady, you get away from me. I'm not giving you anything.
I mean, as one does. Bugger
Yeah, I
off.
mean, she's probably like, who, there was a lot of models. But Susanna Manet wasn't very nice. But our other Suzanne Valadon, who is one of our favorites and is such a favorite. She was episode number 1. She posed for Toulouse-Lautrec. She posed for Jean-Jacques Guénard, and then, of course, most famously for Renoir. He used her to model for many different paintings, including the dance paintings. There's 3 paintings that he did, 2 of which are in the Orsay. The other one, I believe, is also in Boston. But the third one, of the 3 he did, she's in model for 2, one of the ones in Boston, one of the ones here in Paris, and one of the ones that's at the Orsay is actually of his girlfriend at the time, his lover, and because she got really upset because he always saw her she always saw Renoir with Suzanne, and Suzanne got they thought that they were having an affair, and so his girlfriend got very upset and attacked the painting, and he had to repaint it with Eileen's face instead of Suzanne, and that one is also in the Orsay.
I love that though. I mean, there's so much we can see there.
Yeah, and that was actually painted in a studio that is about 2 blocks from where you live today.
No way.
Yeah, so I'll have to point it out to you so you can walk by it and see it. But Suzanne was a little bit more successful than, sadly, Victorine. She began painting in 1892. She was born in 1865. She ended up doing quite a few pieces, and there is a exhibition right now at the Pompidou here in Paris that I cannot wait to go see. That's all about Suzanne Valadon, and our friend Camille their family has a painting there. But she was a little bit more successful. She's probably more well known now for her different love affairs that she had, including she ended up getting pregnant. She had a son, Maurice Utrio, who is probably more famous than she is, but we still don't know to this day who his father is.
And we never will.
We never will. But she was involved also with Eric Satie. But she also had lived in what is now the Musée de Roman or Musée Montmartre, wrong museum, Musée Montmartre. And there you could go in there and you could go into her old atelier, and it's amazing. We love that one.
It's super fun. It's one of my favorites.
But I do love that, they were constantly just absorbing all of these things from these great artists and became artists of their own.
And that's why they still inspire us today.
Still to this day. The next two are two women that I think are amazing. It was really hard. My first list of this, when I went through the podcast and it's like, okay, these are the ones I was going to talk about. It would have been a 2-hour episode, as is almost every time I do anything for the podcast. But I had to narrow it down. And so here are two other favorites that are all about reinvention. And that is, of course, Julia Child and Madame Clicquot, known as Veuve Clicquot.
Both very inspiring women. I mean, just all I know this when we started the podcast, it was only about ladies. I'm glad we expanded, but these ladies, like, they rule.
They are, and I still have a lot of ladies I want to still do. But they're ones that are like so important to me that I know it's going to take me at least like a month to do the research because I'm going to want to get every detail I possibly can right, and really dig deep into it. So we do have some more ladies we'll talk about, but Julia Child is, really for most of the people that listen to the podcast are probably Americans. And I know a lot of Australians, but Julia Child really doesn't need an introduction. Most everybody knows who she is, except for people here in France,
Yeah, I think
which,
most people. Yeah, that's funny how they don't know her here.
yeah, I mean, I guess I could kind of understand. I mean, they all know who Hemingway is and F. Scott Fitzgerald, but Julia Child, known for French cooking, I guess that's not really a thing. And she didn't really kind of transfer over here. But Julia Child was born August 15th, 1912 in Pasadena, California, to very, very wealthy, very Republican family. She met Paul Child, who was also in the OSS, in the summer of 1944. They were married in September of 1946. And in November 1948, on November 3rd specifically, she and Paul arrived in France. They arrived on the coast and they came up. They stopped in Rouen, where she had dinner at La Couronne restaurant, which is still there, one of the oldest restaurants in France, and had saumonière, which was a life-changing dish. And she, at that point, decided everything she loved was all about French food. But she was here, and if you have seen the movie Julie and Julia, or you've read her amazing book, My Life in France, or listened to that episode of the podcast, which was number 12, she talks about how she was here, and she, was here as just, the diplomat, he was working with OSS, and so, they were all expats, and she didn't know what to do with her time, so she would learn to make hats and go play bridge, and all those things are boring for her. So she decided to enroll in the Cordon Bleu. And there she fell in love with cooking even more so and met two ladies as well in Paris. And with these two ladies, they wrote Mastering the Art of French Cooking, that was released on October 16th, 1961. And she was 49 years old.
That just goes to show your greatest accomplishments can be later in life.
It doesn't, yeah, no matter how old you are, you could still do many things. 9 years later, in October, Mastering the Art of French Cooking was released on PBS, and she became a household name. I think that just about almost every home might have her cookbook, or quite a few people have her cookbook. I absolutely love her. She died on August 13th, 2004, and I will never forget waking up that morning and hearing it on the news. And I was so, so sad, because she just was such a amazing, amazing woman. And she came here when she was older and became one of the most famous women in America.
Yeah, and I just love that people in France don't know.
I know. It is pretty funny that they don't, but I am actually going to be doing a few tours all about Julia Child. So that somebody asked me if I would do one, and I said sure. And now I'm going to be doing it a few times. So I can't wait. I love to go where she used to live and touch the door handle. It might have changed since she lived there, but I just love to touch it and think that Julia Child also touched that same handle.
I mean, it's just like many of the places you talk about during your live tours of pointing to doors and say, so and so lived here. And it's just like, really? And sometimes you get a plaque, sometimes you don't.
Yeah, but that's the th those are, I mean, there's just things all the time. I walk by a door all the time. There's no plaque, but it's where Jacques-Louis David moved after he moved out of the Louvre. And it's literally like, 3 blocks from where I live. Is that, but that's just, that's Paris because it's just the history and everything is so long. The next woman is that reinvented herself was Barbe Nicole Ponsardin, known as Veuve Clicquot. She was born December 16th, 1777. At 21, she married a gentleman named Francois Clicquot, who died on October 23rd, 1805. At the time when he died, this was 1805, so this is under Napoleon Bonaparte. The Napoleonic Code was in place. Napoleonic Code stated that a woman could not work or have a company unless she was a widow. So her father-in-law, Philippe Clicquot, they had a winery, which really there was kind of just a side business. They weren't really too into doing anything with it, but she kind of took the reins and decided that she really wanted to fight to keep this. So she did. In 1810, the very first Veuve Clicquot Ponsardin came out. It ended up being the first female champagne produced and the first female-led house in Champagne. And again, it's a name. You don't need an introduction. Everybody knows about Veuve Clicquot. She also was the one who decided to figure out a way when there was all these embargoes and blocking of the rivers, how to navigate to get to Russia because the Russians loved champagne. And at the time, the champagne was like sugar bombs, like literally drinking like just liquid sugar, super, super, super sweet. But she figured out a way to do that. And then once these embargoes and everything opened up, she already had this massive, amazing plan in place and was already making money on her business when other champagne houses had to then figure out a way to catch up.
Women rule at business.
Yeah, and I was recently in Champagne again, and did the Clico tour, which I did in 2016. They didn't mention any of that stuff. They didn't mention the riddling rack. She created the riddling rack is how you get the yeast out of the bottle. All of these things, and I was like, I'm going to need to speak to the manager.
You should definitely have a talk with them about that.
I was like, come on, she was like one of the most amazing women in Champagne, and they're not even talking about it.
Yeah, why would they not talk
I
about
don't
it?
know. It was very sad. Um, the next couple of women that we're going to talk about are some of our favorites because they were courtesans. And we love a courtesan because a courtesan, as we like to call a fancy prostitute. But these two, Valtesse de Laban, she was one of my favorite ones early on that I was like, this is definitely on the list. But we didn't talk about her until episode 36. But Valtesse was born in 1843. Her father was an alcoholic and her mother was most likely a prostitute. And at 12 years old, she started as a laundrette, which was kind of one of the different tiers of working up to be a courtesan. She had beautiful red hair. She was very eye-catching, and she became a dancer and met Offenbach, who is known for the can-can. But she decided to join his troupe at his theater, and she was not a very good actress at all, but because she had this very striking look and this beautiful long red hair, she really got a lot of attention, and people started coming just to watch and see her. From that, she had a relationship with Offenbach, and everything kind of slowly turned her into she just started focusing on being a courtesan. And a courtesan, she had a lover that was a Polish prince that built her a lavish home. But she also inspired Emile Zola's very famous book called Nana. In 1902, she sold her home, and it was like this massive thing because it was all over the paper that people could come in and bid on her things, and there was auctions of all of her belongings, and everybody just wanted the chance to come to her house and walk through it and see everything. It's one of my favorite episodes that we did because I just absolutely love her. And the other one is Ninon de la Clos, and she was born in 1620. She was very close to her father, Henri. her mother wasn't exactly the nicest of ladies, but her father was very liberal and educated her, and she got to learn languages and history and all of these things. But he had to be exiled from France because he was in a duel and he lost this duel. And luckily, he didn't get killed, but he did have to exile and leave France. And so, her mother decided, back then, what I love about the courtesans is back then a woman had two choices. She got to be a married and become married and a mother, or she became a nun. Those are really your two options. And from a very early age, Ninon decided, nope, I don't want to have either one of those things. So her mother being very conservative and saying, this is a path you're going to follow, this is what you're going to do. Her mother, she decided one day, she came home and told her mother, well, I can't do that now because I just had sex and I'm not a virgin. And so now I can't get married. And her mother was furious, threw her in a boarding school. But her mother died in 1642. So she came back to Paris. She attended many of the salons and decided to open her own salon. Another thing that I love about her is that she would bring these young women into her salon and she would train them basically like how to talk, but also she would empower them and, teach them what to read. And she would also then tell the men how they needed to treat the women, like listen to them, don't just talk about yourself, ask them questions. So she was really amazing. She did that her whole life. She, even after she kind of retired from being a courtesan, she would teach other young courtesans of what they need to do and how they deserve to be treated. So she was really amazing. And I love the fact that these women, way, way ahead of their time, and you're talking the 17th century and the beginning, the end of the 19th century, that they both decided, nope, we're not gonna follow the path that we're supposed to be doing. We're gonna do our own thing. She was also a confidant of Louis the 14th and Madame de Maintenon, who we've also discussed before.
I
I
mean,
love
like we said, it's like 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. It's like 6 degrees of a coordinate.
it is pretty much. I mean, we could, if you go and listen to those episodes, you could hear I talk about many of the people that they have claimed to have had relationships with, and it is all over the map.
I mean, there wasn't much more to do back then besides, check out the public executions.
Yeah.
We didn't have iPhones.
No, there was, yeah. I mean, not a lot of people knew how to read. So, there was just, yeah, watching people get beheaded and sex.
Yeah, that's all we had left. That's all on the table, guys.
That's really all they had to do. The next two ladies, I love are all about redefining who they were, and that was Madame de Sévigné, who was a woman that was known as a woman of letters. She was a writer, but that's not how she really had intended her life to be. She was born in 1626. She was born in the Palais Royal. She married a man when she was 18 named Henri de Sévigné. He died in 1651. She became a very wealthy widow at the age of 25 years old. And again, this was at a time when, women couldn't get to, didn't get to do much unless they were a widow. So this was 1651. So long, long, long before Napoleon and Madame Clicquot. But still, the women didn't have that many rights. She was very close with her daughter, and her daughter got married in 1669, and she moved to the south of France. And on February 6th, 1671, she sent her first letter, basically, a letter saying, this is what's going on and this is what I've been doing. Because again, no phones and no, text messages or emails. And then her daughter would start actually sharing these letters with people and reading them. And when she realized that she was doing that, she started to make them even more in depth with more stories. And they became like the telegram of this is what's happening in Paris at the time. She was very close with Nicolas Fouquet, who had the Vaux-le-Vicomte. She was also knew Louis the 14th, and she would hang out at court. So she had all these amazing stories, and she wrote more than 1,000 letters to her daughter. And we don't have all of them, but they started publishing them many, many years ago. And in the episode, we share how a gentleman was I think it was in Burgundy. He went into um, little shop that had all sorts of knickknacks and things. And he found this box, and in this box was a bunch of letters that were tied up with a ribbon. And he opened them up, and they were some of the letters, the original letters. And so he had taken these and he sold them to somebody, and those were published. So I have a book that's of their letters, and it's really fascinating because, she's in contact with Nicolas Fouquet, and he's telling her what's going on as she's putting it in the letters. She's really amazing. And you could go to the Carnavalet Museum because that is the Carnavalet Museum is the History of Paris Museum. It's made up of two houses. One of those houses is the one she used to live in.
Once again, I mean, it's all connected, and there's so many places to visit to relive these people's lives, to reconnect with these women. I mean, it's fascinating.
It's so cool. The other fantastic woman that is also a woman of letters is Georges Sand. She was born, her name when she was born was Amandine Dupin. She was born in 1804. Her mother was a prostitute. We have a theme going on the podcast. How many?
Not many
Which
choices back then.
I should like choose like how many, how many came from, their mother was a prostitute. Um, but her father was married her in the last few weeks of her pregnancy, and the mother just basically, walked away. And so the father sent her to his mother, and they raised her, and it was a very, very wealthy family. At 16 years old, she was married off to a gentleman named Francois Dudevant. He was not a very great guy. He was 42 at the time. She was 16, which was quite normal back then. But he was sleeping with anything that walked. He was knocking up all of the maids at the home and the ladies in town, and she couldn't take it anymore, so she left him. She moved to Paris. She became a writer, and she had to write under a pen name. So she picked the name Georges Sand. She's also really well known because she would always dress like a man. And back then, you had to get special permission from the prefecture to be able to wear men's clothes. But she really did it because it was just cheaper. It was much cheaper to buy men's clothes than it was at that time to buy women's clothes. So that's really why she did. And also, she did not get permission. She just said, forget you guys. But she began, when she began to write and publish, she is the very first woman that was able to live off of the money she made writing.
I mean, we love George Sand. And also the prefecture for pants. I mean, it's bad enough getting a visa there. We had to ask to wear pants not that
Do you
long.
know that rule just went away? I think it was like 2013.
No.
Technically was still in place until 2013.
That's crazy.
You could have been arrested walking down the street in pants.
I love that for us.
Yeah, I
Progress.
don't think it ever happened. I don't think it happened very often. But George Sand also had quite the love life. She was involved with Chopin and Alfred de Musset. So listen to that podcast, that episode. Number 37. It's a really fun one. And the last two ladies that we'll talk about, because there's one lady that I can never not talk about, is about two very courageous ladies. And the first one is Josephine Baker. She was episode 29. And Josephine Baker, most everybody knows who she was. She was born in 1906. She was a very young lady. Her mother was not a very nice woman. I think it was at the age of 6, she became a maid. Her mother basically just kind of gave her to this family to become a maid at 6 years old, where she was treated horribly. She was married at the age of 14, and she decided to get out of St. Louis and out of America because she was Black and she wasn't accepted very easily there. And so on October 2nd, 1925, so almost exactly 100 years ago, she arrived in Paris and became the belle of the ball. Everybody was obsessed with her performing on stage. They loved her. Through her life, she fought really hard for civil rights. She actually was at the March on Washington with MLK. And when he was killed, his widow, Coretta Scott, had asked her to come back to America to take over and lead the civil rights movement. And she said no, because America had treated her so terribly as a Black woman, and she stayed in France. But she, during World War II, had passed notes through sheet music as she was touring around and did that for the resistance. And nobody ever suspected her because she was a singer and a dancer. And so she is amazing. And I think it was 2021, she was inducted into the Pantheon here in Paris. So that was a symbolic induction. They didn't move her body there, but there is a tomb down there underneath that has her name engraved in it, just like in all the other ones. So it's still fun to go by there and see that. But she was an amazing woman and also one of the very first Americans to go into the Pantheon. And the next one, the last woman we'll talk about, if you've listened to this, everybody should probably know who I'm going to mention. And she is one that should be in the Pantheon, and we're working on it. So please go to my website and check this out and sign it. It is, of course, Rose Valland.
We love Rose.
She's my favorite. I know I need to just start the Rose Valland fan club, and we can make t-shirts and things. But she was episode number 9. She was born in 1898. She was an amazing, amazing woman. She was so smart. She was an only child. Her parents did everything they could to get her into university because at the time it wasn't very easy for a woman to go. She was enrolled and she went to the Beaux-Arts school in Lyon. Then she came to Paris and went to the École des Beaux-Arts here. She ended up going to the University of Paris and also the École du Louvre. In 1932, she was given a job to work at the Jeu de Paume, which is the museum that's in the Tuileries. And she was to curate exhibitions of French artists that would then tour around the world, spreading the news, and the love of French art. But in 1940, the Germans arrived into Paris, and they wanted a larger space for all of the art that they were stealing from and looting from mostly Jewish galleries and homes. And Jacques Joujar, who was in charge of the museums of France, said, let's put them at the Jeu de Paume. And he said to the wonderful Rose Valland, he's like, you stay there and watch, because they didn't realize is that she was pretty, nondescript. There wasn't anything flamboyant about her looks. And she spoke perfect German. She spoke many languages. She also had a memory that she could remember everything she saw and read and heard. So she would be in there, and every, few days a truck would drive up and unload boxes and crates of things stolen from Jewish homes and galleries. And she would hear them talk, and she would see paperwork and see the numbers on the crates and the names. And she'd go home and fill these journals with it. And later, these journals would be given to the Allied troops, also known as the Monuments Men, that were put together of different art historians and curators and all sorts of people. And they would use her notes to know where to find these things as the war ended. And because of her, more than 65,000 pieces were returned to families, and that number still grows today. At one point, two different times, they almost caught her. And if they did, they would have killed her instantly. And she, I think, is one of the most amazing women and courageous. She spent their entire life until she died in 1980 doing nothing but trying to the restitution of art back to its original owners.
She definitely deserves a spot in the Pantheon. I mean, why is she not there?
We're working on it. I think we're only at 2,000 some odd signatures, and we need to get to like 500,000. But I will put the link again on my website. So you could please click on it and sign up. It doesn't cost you anything. You just sign up with your name and email. And then we'll get it eventually, hopefully, to the number that she could get into the Pantheon, because nobody deserves it more than she does. But of these 10 women, there's so many. I have gotten so attached to some of them. There's so many other ones, Camille Claudel, Zelda, who you love. There's so many of these women that had such an amazing story that I think we could learn so much from, no matter where you are in your life or, what you have going on. I think so many of these women have a message that we could learn so much from.
Even today, they're still inspiring us. And we really appreciate you guys listening, giving us feedback. We always want to hear from you. Please, anytime, drop us a line, drop Claudine a line. You always know our websites are in the show notes. And thank you so much for listening. We can't wait to keep bringing more history to you guys.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thanks for listening today, guys. If you're interested in learning more about Claudine, her tours, history, and the beautiful photographs that she posts all over Instagram, tune into her website, claudinehemingway.com.